Let's welcome Rachel Greiner.
All right, thank you guys for coming, especially with a title like Wanted, Dead or Alive, because you were probably like, Halloween! Oh, it's not about Halloween. So thank you for coming anyway. I appreciate that. You guys are awesome. Like she said, we're going to be talking about life issues. We will be talking about abortion. Statistically, there's probably some people here in the room who have experiences with that, whether it was their own or someone else's. And I want to make sure everyone stays civil. You guys don't look like that'll be a problem. And obviously, anytime we talk about this, we know we've all made mistakes. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm perfect or that anyone's judging, because there's no time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. All right, moving on. Did anybody see this on Twitter or Facebook? You saw it? Okay. Do you see it on Facebook? Okay. Every once in a while, I'll be on Facebook, mostly for Lutherans for Life. You should like all of us, by the way. And on the side, a lot of times they'll show you what's trending and things like that. And for like 3 days straight, it seemed like Shout Your Abortion was trending on Twitter. And then I started thinking about other times I see it in the media. Like, have any of you watched the show Scandal? Admit it. Really? Well, I feel old. Thank you. You're like, only old people watch that. Well, I've watched it on occasion. And last season, they had an episode where they tackled the topic of abortion. Or like, I was on Facebook yesterday. Now you're going to think I'm on Facebook all the time. And it's for work. And a bunch of my friends are posting pictures about some Dirty Dancing viewing event, the movie Dirty Dancing. And it seems like a lot of my girlfriends, it's their favorite movie ever. And I feel like I'm the only one who's like, wait, isn't there an abortion in that movie? They're like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. So abortion is definitely part of our culture. It's definitely part of our media. But sometimes we don't even notice it because we're kind of used to it. I had a friend who loved Tosh O. Is that, or Tosh Dotto? How do you say it? Tosh Poino. I knew it wasn't how I was saying it. And she was like, oh, he's hilarious. And so one day I was flipping through the channels, I think it was, and all of a sudden it was him. I was like, oh, I gotta check this guy out. And he is very attractive, so I did check him out. And then I watched and listened, and he was doing jokes about abortion. And I was like, ooh, needless to say, I'm not a big fan. But abortion comes up, whether it's someone making a joke or being seriously addressing a topic. We know it's politicized. Everybody uses it to try to get your votes or get you to not vote for someone. But it also comes up on college campuses. I'd say the media and college campuses are two places where it really gets talked about a lot, whether it's from a professor or a classmate or a certain club. Have any of you had professors ever mention it? Maybe they talked about the right to choose or something like that. I know in some classes it comes up. I did a couple classes post-secondary when I was in high school before I went to WLC. And it would come up and be like the randomest classes. Like I'd be in geography and it would come up and I'm like, really? So we're gonna be talking about a lot of different sides to it. We're probably gonna move a little quickly. I speak quickly, it's probably because I'm from Ohio. My dad talks really fast, so it could be worse. All right, so has anyone seen Juno before? Okay, can anyone give us like the Reader's Digest version of what's going on with her right now or where she is? Anyone remember where she is?
Is that before she tells her parents that she's pregnant?
I'm not sure, but I know she's at the abortion clinic. And it's before she decides that she's actually gonna have make an adoption plan. But I always thought that scene was so interesting because you never know what facts or songs or things like that will stick in your head. And for that scene, for her, what did it was this idea that at 11 weeks, the baby already has fingernails. And it's true, these are fetal models. This is a 12-week-old. And it's amazing because you could see they tried to give it fingernails, but it's so hard they couldn't even get it on the model. But babies have fingernails when they're 11 weeks old. That's crazy. That's about the time that a lot of abortions happen, is they already have fingernails. We know they have a heartbeat before then, but they have fingernails. It's crazy. And by the way, that movie is a way more realistic representation of a crisis pregnancy than a lot of movies. I was talking to the guy who directed and produced a movie called Bella years ago. Really good, highly recommend it. And he said, honestly, I love my movie, but Juno, man, you gotta check out Juno. He highly recommends it. Here's the deal, crisis pregnancy. I've helped a lot of women in crisis pregnancy situations, and I'd love to be like, oh, there's a situation where it's easy, but it isn't. That's why it's called a crisis pregnancy. There's no easy options. I'd love to be like, oh, you just make an adoption plan, it's like it never happened. But we all know that's not true. Some people say, oh, just have an abortion, take care of it. It'll be like it never happened, like going to the dentist, getting a tooth out. it won't be a big deal. But I know that's not true also because I've helped counsel women who are traumatized, who have post-abortion syndrome. They have a very hard time. There was a woman that my mom knew, and I'm allowed to tell you guys, I'm not violating any sort of confidentiality, and she couldn't turn on the vacuum because it would remind her of the vacuum from her abortion. So it's amazing the ways that it can impact you. So then some people say, oh, it's not a big deal, you just have the baby, you parent it. Now, most of you guys, and I know I don't have kids, but the parents in the house, is it easy to parent? It doesn't look easy. Parenting looks really hard, from what I can tell. So we know that's not an easy option. And that's part of why we need to be sensitive in these situations. I think sometimes we forget about the real life people involved, the moms, the dads, and obviously we always want to remember the kids too. So real quick, if you haven't been in a crisis pregnancy, you might be curious about some of the reasons. I'd say about 3/4 of the time, they usually cite some sort of reason relating to inconvenience. Maybe they're in school and they're thinking, how am I going to go to school and raise a kid? I'm a kid. Maybe they're thinking, I really don't like this guy. I don't want to see him ever again, much less have a kid with him. I don't want to be attached to him. No. Sometimes it can be really shallow reasons. I knew a woman, it was going to mess up her vacation. And that was why she was strongly considering choosing to have an abortion. So it really varies, it runs the gamut. A lot of times people will hear abortion, they think, oh, well, that's mostly just for like health of the mother, rape situations like that. And statistically, we know that's not true. Now, generally for stats relating to abortion and pregnancy and things like that, I recommend you go to CDC or Guttmacher, which is actually the research branch of Planned Parenthood. They're pretty honest with that. So according to those sort of stats, we see 1% or so of all abortions are situations where the mother was raped. We see also statistically that about 1% of the time, it's actually less than that, is a situation where the mother's life is threatened. So we're talking over 90% of the time, this isn't to save the life of the mother, this isn't a rape situation. Most of these are other situations. About half the time, it's someone who's already had an abortion. A lot of the time, it's someone who already has a kid. Now, this is a stat that drives me crazy. I don't know if you guys will be like me. But 90% of prenatal children that are diagnosed with Down syndrome are aborted. 90%. That's craziness, especially when you bear in mind, sometimes those diagnoses are wrong. As brilliant as doctors are, there's still a lot of things they haven't figured out, and a lot of it happens in the womb. That's crazy to me. I am so lucky to get to work with a lot of people with special needs. And they have way more joy than a lot of us. Statistically, according to the research, people with Down syndrome, when they do these little happy surveys, they're way happier than the rest of us. And yet 9 out of 10 of them are losing their lives. It's craziness. So I know we're in Wisconsin and not Texas, but so much of that I felt like was useful information for all of us. And to share the history so quickly and efficiently, I kind of appreciate that about the video, especially how it shows kind of legal precedents and all of that. So I'm a big fan of that video. And when they talk about you guys being the generation to end abortion, it's true. Statistically, you guys are way more skeptical about elective abortion than other people. Statistically, you guys are making a difference. Statistically, you guys are kind of killing it, so it's awesome. All right, so moving on. She shared a little bit about Carol Everett as well as Abby Johnson, who are both involved with the abortion industry, both left. This is a quote from Dr. Levatino. He also did. It's happening left and right. It's crazy right now. He was sharing a little bit about the procedure. It is unpleasant. This is the only time where we'll talk about the procedures just a little bit, because sometimes it's best to know the information. So it says, you take an instrument like this called a Sofer clamp, and you basically, the surgery is that you literally tear a child to pieces. The suction is only for the fluid. The rest of it is literally dismembering a child, piece by piece, with an abortion instrument. Absolutely gut-wrenching procedure, Dr. Levantino said. Again, people talk about it like it's like getting a tooth removed. Like, it's no big deal. The baby is so big that they have to dismember it for it to be able to exit the woman's body. But the cool thing, again, is God can change anyone's heart. And he's using people like Dr. Levantino, Abby Johnson, Carol Everett to make a difference. And when people say, oh, it's not that bad, they can say, it's that bad. I'm there. And they can say, guess what? Change is happening, and it is. All right. Some people say, well, it's not like the baby can feel pain. And we know from so much research that that's just not true. An unborn child at 20 weeks gestation is fully capable of experiencing pain. Without question, abortion is a dreadfully painful experience for any infant subjected to such a surgical procedure. And there's about 5 other professors I can think of off the top of my head who will say the same thing. This is a doctor from Case Western. He's an MD. Very smart guy. All right, and when I read some of this stuff, it's so unpleasant. Like, it's such a downer. But I'm reminded by things like this quote by Dr. King that says, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." And then I'm like, oh, maybe I do need to know this sort of thing. So, review. Does anyone have a guess of how many babies are aborted in a day? I'll give you a clue. It's about 1.2 million per year. So if any of you are better at math than me. Okay, you're as good at math as I am. Okay. It is 3,300. And in Wisconsin, that's 19 a day, which is basically a kindergarten class. So I think about as, imagine a kindergarten class, poof, being gone every single day of the year. Because sometimes I hear these big numbers like 1.2 million, and it's so big I can't even wrap my head around it. Sometimes I will think about like football stadiums, and I'll be like, okay, so that's like 10 of this one or 10 of that one. But 19 a day, a kindergarten class a day in Wisconsin disappearing. It's craziness. Something I used to hear a lot, you still hear it sometimes, is this phrase, every child a wanted child. Now, let's be honest. Do we want every child to be wanted? Yeah, no one's going to be like, no, I don't want those kids to be loved. I want to be hated. No one's going to say that. No one's a monster. Well, some people are, but most people aren't. That's craziness. Now, the only danger with this idea is they'd say every child a wanted child, but those unwanted children, it should be like they never happened. This is a quote from Diana Phillips. She's from the National Coalition of Abortion Providers. So again, not what we would call a pro-lifer. She says, pro-choice docs would say that it is not their business to determine for a patient when life begins. Ultimately, each patient determines the value and definition of life within her own mind and heart. So again, this is a subjective thing. This is the idea that I could look at you and be like, I don't want you around. I'm going to dehumanize you. We can eliminate you. Now, it's hard because you're probably bigger than me. But if it's a baby, most people are, but if it's a baby, that's not the case, right? It's a lot easier when you can't see that person face to face. And I showed a hospital because it always boggles my mind that in a lot of hospitals, if the baby's wanted, they will do everything they can to save that baby. They do in utero surgeries 4 or 5 months along. It's amazing. But if the mom doesn't want to be pregnant, those same facilities, all those life-saving resources are used for the opposite. And I've always just thought that inconsistency was ridiculous. Plus, I live across the street from a hospital, so then I think of it more often. Does anyone know what cognitive dissonance is? I'm sure Jeff does, but anyone else? He's smarter than all of us. Yes? Okay. Okay, thank you. Do you have anything to add to that?
It's fighting with yourself.
Okay, that's a great explanation. And yeah, it's hard to explain off the top of your head. I'm with you. I would describe it, and it might not be perfect, but I describe it as this idea that when you have these core beliefs and they get threatened, it creates stress. And that's how some of this stuff can be. I know for me, if I'm going to be real honest with you guys, as a Christian, one of the biggest challenges with my faith has probably been the abortion issue. Because I'm like, they're little babies in their mom. Like, that should be the safest place for anybody. And it's the most dangerous place. Like, that doesn't compute, because I know we have a loving God. So for me, I get it. If some of this stuff, it's natural to be resistant and be like, no. Because to me, he's going to have to explain it in heaven, because I don't get it, and he's not explaining it to me. I will say, though, that it is amazing how God can reach people through post-abortion programs. And it's amazing. All right, moving on. It's Marquette, so I felt like I should have a Pope quote. Plus, he's like everywhere right now. So, I love this quote. It's wrong to look the other way and remain silent, which instantly made me think of the Good Samaritan. And something crazy about that story is you have all the churchy people walking by. The religious elite aren't the ones that took care of him. It was the Samaritan that took care of him. And for me, that's kind of always a reminder, like, are we really expressing God's love in our actions? Because it's great to be pro-life in your heart. It's great to be loving in your heart. But it doesn't help anyone until it translates into action. And that's how you should be with women, with fathers, with children, with someone who is pro-abortion, with someone who does abortions. I don't think there's ever a reason not to be loving. I'm going to use the F word, and by that I mean fetus. I don't mean the other F word. Fetus is a developmental term. People use it because it sounds really cold, like it's a comeback, like whatever fetus, like it's a dig. But it's a developmental term. It's like calling someone a toddler. And they're actually a fetus right until they're born, right up to that moment. So like a 7-month-old baby growing in its mother is a fetus technically. But people say it because it sounds cold. I will use fetus, baby, prenatal child, preborn baby. There's like 5 others I'll use. I know your generation and people like me, I don't like labels. They kind of like make me uncomfortable. But for some of this stuff, it is helpful to use labels. So I will probably use terms, if you haven't noticed, like pro-life and pro-choice, even though most people's beliefs are more complex than that. All right. I believe that when we talk about this, we get this idea that it's like Braveheart or like this epic battle where you have these 2 lines and they're going to kill each other, and it's crazy. And I think with the average person, your classmate, your cousin, maybe not your professors, but most average people are probably going to be a lot closer with you on this stuff than we realize. I think, again, we picture people being more extreme on this than they are. And there is common ground. And if you're talking with someone, whether it's a roommate or another student about this issue, I think, if possible, try to find some common ground, because that helps you look at them as a person. It helps you talk to them as opposed to like being an argument. You're like, oh, this is a regular person. They like the same band as me, or things like that. So we'll start out talking about that a little bit. This is a booth someone had on another campus. It says on the white, you can't really read it, but it says, should abortion stay legal? And they have yes, it depends, and no. And they used to just have yes and no, but now they have it depends. So many more people come in dialogue with them because there's so many people who are like, well, I'm against abortion, but if it's for the life of the mother, then my opinion changes. Or there's, I remember in college, I had a friend, and she was like, I really like the pro-life stuff, but what about rape? And we talked a little bit, and we talked about the idea that like it's wrong for the baby to have to die because of something the dad did. Like, I wouldn't want the death penalty because of something my dad did. That just doesn't jive. That doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem like justice. And the truth is, in one of those situations, part of why rape is so horrible is it's more than physical. I think it affects the whole person, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I think it violates someone in a way that can't really be equaled. I think the punishment should be as bad as it can be. And I think people joke about it, especially on college campuses, and it's got to stop. But I also think that rape victims understand that idea of violation, and that's why like 3/4 of them that end up pregnant through rape, which again is a tiny percentage of all the rape victims, only tiny percentage becomes pregnant, but they matter. And out of that little percentage, 3/4 of them choose life. And I think a lot of them intuitively know more violence isn't going to fix this. All right, there are things we can all agree on. For example, I had spaghetti yesterday and I had a white shirt on. Who do you think won? The white shirt or the spaghetti? It was the spaghetti. Like, I knew it was coming and I did it anyway. That's humiliating. I have a friend, Angie, who likes to dress up her dog that looks just like that, Sasha, in outfits. It's humiliating, and you can tell the dog gets it. Like, the dog is like, really? This is humiliating. There's things like that we can agree on. And again, it helps us see each other as people as opposed to some argument or domino we have to knock down. And that's good, especially when we're talking about important issues like this. It's good if we can have a little levity. Now, there are some issues where it's different. For example, would you guys agree that abortion is wrong if it's based on the gender of the baby? Okay, and you can just nod or say, yep. What about the color of skin of the baby? I'm very glad to see you guys nodding your head, otherwise we'll have to chat later. Okay, but it happens. There's people where they're like, oh, I don't want my baby to look different than me, or I don't want my baby to look this way. And it's crazy. It's the most racist thing I can imagine. It's shocking. There's other times we can all agree that women deserve more resources, right? That we need to do some things, we need to make some progress as a society. The fact that women feel often like their only choice is abortion, that's not freedom. That shows that we have a lot of work to do. We need to make some changes. This idea is that, oh, we should make women be like men, because men can't have kids. So we should treat them that way, and that way we're equal if we take away their ability to have kids and have a job, or have kids and have a life. That's not equality. All right, so some quick tips. And I have had a conversation or two with people who disagree about this stuff before, so I didn't just like come up with this stuff. Number one, listen to understand, not to have a comeback, okay? Not to rebut them. See the person. That can be really hard when we're passionate about this and we're thinking about saving lives, but try to see the person. It's okay to pause. It's okay to say, I've never thought about that. I have to think about that a little bit. Don't feel like you have to like be this expert debater on one of those angry political shows where they're yelling. Don't feel like you have to have a comeback. If you say, you know what, I have to think about it, they're probably going to be like, I really appreciate that. They're being honest. That's awesome. We're having a real conversation. Remember, you can't make anyone believe or do anything. Usually it's not one conversation that changes someone's mind about this. Usually it's a couple conversations. It's okay not to know all the answers. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. If you ask me questions about some of that, I probably won't know. I might know one or two of them. Truth is true regardless of the time. Sometimes with this, you will be the only person speaking up. You might be in a class where the professor is saying something totally ridiculous about this, and you're the only one that says, but what about this? Or I believe this. You might be the only one, and that can be very uncomfortable. But who else is with you in that moment? Sunday school answer? Jesus, right? He really is there. It's okay to be passionate. It's okay to be humble. I love this quote. Anything that can be done in anger can be done better without it. And again, it's okay to have righteous passion, but try not to get angry at the person, at least not too much, because then they're taking control, and we don't want that. We see it in Corinthians, do everything in love. And again, this is all way easier said than done. It's way easier for me to be like, and do it lovingly, and be humble, and listen to them. That's a lot easier than when they're in your face and they're yelling at you. The other day, someone told me to go blank myself because they said something, and I gave one line, and I knew I shouldn't do it, but I said one little logical, not offensive response, just a little rebuttal, but what about this, or have you considered that? And that was her response, like immediately. And on the one hand, I was like, whoa. And on the other hand, I was like, clearly you have nothing. Like, if that's what you resort to, clearly I've won this conversation. Plus, then everyone like pounced on her, so it's okay. So let's make the case for life. What does this look like? Again, I know I do a lot of Dr. King quotes. There's just so many similarities between the civil rights movement and the pro-life movement that I can't avoid them. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And college campus, that is like primo. It's probably the time where you will most be the challenged on this kind of stuff. All right, so this is the basic pro-life argument or syllogism. Let's see if we agree on these. First principle, it is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. All right, number two, so far so good. Elective abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Now, some of you probably are like, what's elective abortion? Elective abortion, they're saying not abortions where it's medically necessary, like to save the mom. These are, again, the other ones where it's like, I don't like the guy who got me pregnant. I'm not sure how I'll pay for school, that sort of thing. This isn't to save the life of anybody. Third principle, therefore, elective abortion is morally wrong. Can we agree? This is one of those A, B sort of things. All right. I put this in your little programs. This is probably the most useful thing in that. And the great thing is you don't have to write all of it. When I first heard something like this, I had to write it furiously. This is your 1-minute soundbite. If you can memorize this, you will be gold, okay? I am pro-life because the science of embryology establishes that from the, and it's long, from the earliest stages of human development, you were a distinct, living, and whole human being. And there's no essential difference between that embryo you were and the adult you are today that would justify killing you at that earlier stage of development. Differences of size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency aren't good reasons for saying you should be killed now. And that kind of sums it all up in a nice little package. Any embryology textbook is going to say this, but basically, we'll cut to the chase. The zygote represents the first cell of the new individual. So again, when that sperm and the ovum meet, it's a miracle. It's a new person. That DNA is different than anyone else's DNA. If it's a boy baby, okay, that's obviously a different person than the mom. Okay, that hasn't happened yet. All right, maybe someday they'll figure out how to get men pregnant. I don't want to be there. I don't want to see it. This is the idea of SLED. A brilliant guy named Klusendorf, I believe, came up with this. If not, he's the one who I always hear talking about it. And again, the idea is that none of these things make you less human. None of these things take away your value of life. People say, well, abortion's okay because they're so little. But generally, women are smaller than men. Doesn't mean you can kill us. Okay, environment. If I'm here, I'm not less human than I am here. Development. There are very, very big high schoolers and very little kindergartners. Okay, there's a development difference. It doesn't mean any of them are more human or anything like that. Being small isn't justification for killing someone. Let's see, degree of dependency. If you're an astronaut, you're dependent on people, okay? College kids, a lot of them are dependent. I was pretty dependent on my parents, I'll be honest. If not for them, I wouldn't have eaten, okay? They're dependent. It doesn't mean I was less human, though. It doesn't mean people could have been like, no. All right, moving on. So that's SLED. They showed this in the video. I got really excited when this came out, by the way. I think most pro-lifers did. It says time. 40 years ago, this was the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. 40 years ago, abortion rights activists won an epic victory with Roe v. Wade, which they did. They've been losing ever since. Cecile Richards is the current head of Planned Parenthood, the #1 abortion provider in the country. Her predecessor, one of the reasons she quit, most people say the reason she quit, is because she'd go to things, or at least view things like the March for Life, and she'd see people that look like you. She'd see young people. She'd see the stats. She'd hear all this stuff about how the pro-life movement is young and change is happening, and it's happening fast. And she realized, I've got to back out. And then they got Cecile Richards, who's a little younger and prettier. All right? They've been losing ever since Roe v. Wade. It's true. 70 abortion clinics plus now have closed since 2011. Abortion workers are leaving like crazy. I said your generation and Hispanics are both more skeptical of abortion. 97% is what I heard, I think, of OBGYNs have patients who talk to them about getting an abortion, who contact them about abortions. Only about 13% of them actually do the procedure. Right? There's all these encouraging stats coming up. But that was my face when I saw that cover. I got really excited because it was so good. And it's Time magazine. They're not known for being on my side of some things. All right, so some common pro-choice arguments. Can you guys think of any? I won't judge if you don't. Yeah, the whole my body, my choice. Now, again, for me, the easiest thing to go back to if you're talking about that is the embryology and the idea that it's really not your body. And a lot of people in those situations talk about a baby like it's this parasite, but there's a zillion different things that have to happen in a woman's body for her to even conceive. It's not like this hostile thing. It's amazing. And the baby can actually sometimes provide things for the mom and vice versa that helps them both be healthier. It's amazing. What's another one you guys might have heard? And again, it's not a bad thing if you haven't heard more. Yeah, all the time I hear that. But what about all these poor babies? These poor babies, they're going to have no money. Their moms maybe are drug addicts. Like, it's just going to be awful. And so my question is, in those sorts of situations, can we apply that to toddlers? Because I meet lots of moms whose kids are in rough situations. I'm not going to lie. It's a rough situation. But is that justification for killing a toddler? No, and they say, but there's a difference. It's a toddler and a baby, but scientifically, it's the same person. And they're equally human, right? That's the cool thing that we all share. We are all equally human. Doesn't matter if you're straight, gay, tall, short, black, white, purple, whatever. We're all equally human. And that's why that kind of argument doesn't really work. By the way, if I hadn't said it a bunch of times, yes?
The government can't tell me what to do.
Oh yeah, the idea that it's rights. Like, why are you putting your religion on me? What is that about? And it's interesting because, again, I like how it echoes the civil rights movement. People used to say that all the time. Or oh, you don't like abortion, don't have one. Can you imagine if we applied that to other behaviors? Oh, you don't like spousal abuse, don't abuse your spouse. People used to say all the time, oh, you don't like slavery, don't have a slave. There's certain things as a society where they are wrong. And even if the laws don't reflect it yet, they will. So yeah, ad hominem, that's when they attack you. I love that one. Well, have you adopted any kids? No. So if I adopt all the kids, then abortion's wrong. Is that what you're saying? And they say no. And it's crazy because most of the pro-lifers I know probably have adopted or helped other people adopt. It's crazy. It's cool, but it's crazy. It's just tissue. Okay, these are skin cells. These are very different than embryonic stem cells. Okay, that is very different. It's a different person. I shared a little bit about my thoughts on rape and incest. Again, I think we have to show compassion, but the behavior of the father never justifies killing the child. And an act of violence should never try to be fixed with another act of violence. You're not fixing the problem. The rape doesn't magically disappear if she doesn't get pregnant. Okay? And friends of mine who are rape victims would say that. Another thing I hear a lot of times is Planned Parenthood does come up. This isn't a Planned Parenthood talk. We're not going to talk about them much. But people say, well, places like Planned Parenthood, only 3% is abortion. Like, why are you even talking about this? It's not that big a deal. And this is Abby Johnson. She was...
I get from you guys is this. Abby.
Oh, here we go.
Spread this far and wide.
All right, so again, that's Abby Johnson. She was the director of one of the biggest Planned Parenthood operations there were. She was a director. What happened is she was assisting or observing an abortion procedure, and the baby, I believe the baby resisted or recoiled or fought against the tool. And after that, she was like, I can't do this, and she left. And Planned Parenthood, they started to sue her and all these different things because they were afraid of what she was going to say. But she lawyered up, and obviously, she's doing a good job. All right, we don't need to say it twice. So again, they say 3%. This is the reality. I lived in a town called Sioux Falls for a while. That's over twice the population. That's craziness. All right, again, we hear all these crazy ideas, all these crazy lies. One, elective abortion, it's good for women. And the truth is some women do seem relieved, at least initially. But there's a whole lot of other women who are walking wounded. It's something where it's every day they're reminded of it. And any of us who've dealt with guilt or shame, we know how horrible that can be. So can you imagine carrying around 30, 40 years? That's what I've seen with someone. All right. So again, I can say these things all day, but I like to have it backed up, especially in an academic setting. So the source for this is Medical Science Monitor, and it talks about how abortion dramatically affects a woman's well-being. Recently, there was a study that came out where they're like, look, this is proof that abortion doesn't hurt women. It was a bogus study. If you look into how they did it, who was involved, things like that, it's a horrible study. It's garbage. This was a good one. Relationship with partner improved. Less than 1% said yes. Felt better about myself. Less than 1%. Felt more control in my life. That sounds great, right? It seems like, I'll have an abortion. I will be in control. Right now, the situation is out of control. I need control. I'll get the abortion. Less than 1%. Felt guilt. About 78%. Felt that part of them died. Again, they bond with that child. Chemically, they bond. So we see about 60%. Unable to forgive self, 62%. That's horrible. That's horrible. God doesn't want women walking around feeling that way. He wants them to find healing. But healing only comes if you acknowledge what happened and you see that God's forgiveness is bigger than that. Telling them, oh, no, you're fine. Oh, it was the right choice. Oh, it's not a big deal. Doesn't make that guilt go away. That's not loving. It also found that 1 in 7 women meet the full diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. That's crazy. A lot of times we see that with soldiers when they come back from war. Yeah. Yeah, so out of the women that had 1 out of 7 met, I think all the criterion, or most of them, for having that trauma. And we've seen it in our center. When you're having these conversations, especially if they tend to feel kind of debate-ish, a little bit like an argument, I think we feel like we have to be these experts and know everything and have a comeback for everything. And then at the end, they're going to be like, you're right. You're smarter than me. I changed my mind. If that ever happens, let me know, because I've never experienced that, but it sounds awesome. Remember, you can do offense, too. Ask them where they got the idea. Maybe they haven't had the chance to really think out. Maybe they're just repeating it like a slogan from a commercial. But Planned Parenthood does all these great services. The number of times I've heard that. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. They kill people, but they do all these great services. Hitler did art. It wasn't good, but he did art. I don't care. He killed people. That's a deal breaker for me. Sorry, I'm extreme that way. I don't know. So you can be proactive. You can ask them questions like, what do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Have you considered the implications of your views? People say, oh, abortion isn't even in the Bible. Drunk driving is not in the Bible. Shooting people with guns, not in the Bible. Doesn't mean God likes it. Scripture is very clear about how valuable we each are, shedding innocent blood. Old Testament, there's lots of verses about speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves, rescuing those being taken away to death. Lots of beautiful proverbs about growing in the womb, too. New Testament, we see how it uses the Greek word brephos in different places, and at one point it's referring to Jesus growing in Mary, and another point they're talking about the newborn Jesus, same word. And there's Hebrew situations like that too, where it's similar to that idea. This is Wilberforce. Does anyone know who he is? Okay, he's awesome. I believe there's a movie called Amazing Grace about him, so you don't even have to read a book. You can just watch a movie. It's probably on Netflix. I don't know. He was an Englishman, and his faith translated into action. So it wasn't enough for him just to believe things. He wanted to do something about it because his faith was that strong. And he's credited with being kind of the driving force in getting rid of the slave trade in Britain. And he didn't give up. He just kept going and going and going. And so I think that's a good inspiration for us. Historically, the early Christian church, they were the ones rescuing these babies that were under 2 weeks old that people said, we don't want it. They were the ones that were rescuing the babies. So there's kind of a heritage thing. And the cool thing is with Christ, we get moral courage because we know he's right there, got our back, saying, yes, 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 this is my truth. And then when we trust him, what happens next is on him, which is nice that we can be like, I did my part. What happens is up to you, God. I like that. I think that's awesome. All right, this is a Wilberforce quote. You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know. For a lot of people, once you learn the reality of abortion, it changes your life. I did not plan on doing pro-life work. My mom runs a pregnancy center, and she's also a teacher, so of course I got a degree too. And when I was little, they're like, oh, you look just like your mom, because I do. And we talk similarly. We like a lot of those same things. It's very Gilmore Girl-like. It's crazy. Like, I look and talk. I basically became my mom at the age of 20-something. Isn't that supposed to happen later? Like, I thought you're supposed to become your mom, like, later. And I started, like, now. So this wasn't my plan, but God decided, and it's been a fun ride, so I'm glad he did. We're just about done. You guys have been amazing. I know it's dark and comfy, and you just got to eat carbs, so you're probably, like, ready for nap time. So thank you for being awesome. But I saw this. Imagine if people were this passionate about things that actually matter. And again, this hit kind of close to home, because if you saw like my closet or my car or even my office, depending on the season, I'm probably more like this than a lot of people, than a lot of men. Okay, I have the jerseys, I have the pictures, I have the shoes and the shorts and the jackets and the vests and the pom-poms and everything else, the hats. I get this. But the truth is, like, what if we put just like a fraction of that energy into, I don't know, supporting moms, having the scare of their life, helping them see that they can have a great future with their child? That might be pretty cool. That might be even better than watching our favorite team. And I'm from Ohio, so mine is Ohio State. I know they're not very popular in this state. Moving on before you say anything. So again, pro-life, people say it like it's this label, like you eat carrots, like, oh yeah, I'm pro-life. And that's great, but you guys can do more with it, and some of you are. You guys can turn it into a lifestyle. And I'm not saying that means you have to do pro-life work. We need pro-life doctors. We need pro-life lawyers. We need pro-life grocery store owners. We have fundraisers. We need pro-life people in all the different fields. So instead of just voting a certain way, which you should do, it makes a difference in my opinion, but however you vote is your choice. It can be more than that. Again, we can do it with love. We can trust in God. He's going to help us in this battle. And I really feel like he's blessing us with all the victories we're seeing. Like I told you, it's awesome. I feel like whenever I check my email, it's something about a baby getting saved and a mother getting supported, or an abortion clinic closing, or someone leaving the industry. Like, it's happening like crazy. And again, you guys are the pro-life generation. Now, there's like a zillion different ways you guys can get involved and do things. I wrote down a lot. It didn't take me very long. I'm like, oh, they can do this and this and this and this. So you have many options. If you don't want to be, that was exciting. If you don't want to be a pro-life speaker, for example, you can do other things. You can wear pro-life gear. Speaking of which, I brought a hat and bracelets because I have a lot of stuff in my office and I want to get rid of it. So are any of you willing to commit? I have 3 bracelets. Commit to being a little bit more vocal about this type of thing? Yeah, you are. You get the hat then. You raise your hand first. Anyone else? And again, I'm not saying you have to be like a protester, or you have to be angry, or you have to shut down Planned Parenthood, but do a little bit. A lot of your colleges have pro-life groups. I don't know about MSOE, but I know Marquette does. I know WLC does, because they're awesome. And I know that UWM does, Panthers for Life. So you guys can really get involved, and you can make a difference. Like, there could be generations that exist because of a conversation you had, because of a vote you did, or things like that. That's mind-boggling to me, because we read about all these people during like the Holocaust or during the times of the Underground Railroad, and we're like, man, how cool. Like, they actually saved lives. They didn't wear a cape, but they saved someone's life. And the truth is, you guys can do that. There's an abortion clinic over on Farwell. We can talk. You guys can make that difference, and it's going to be really cool, and it's going to be a total God thing, because you're going to look at it, you're going to be like, I don't know how he did it, but that's awesome. So yes, we're just going to cut it there, because I've been talking for a long time. Does anyone have questions about any of this? I know I threw a lot of information about it. It could be anything: procedures, being pro-life, stories. I said everything. I know it's a lot to take in.
Like, how do you, I mean, you can be pro-life in like your everyday life, but if you're not volunteering, like, how do you even start that conversation? Like,
Yeah.
or know someone is thinking of having an abortion?
So, love that question. It's awesome. There's definitely different things you can do. One thing is praying too. Like, if you could be praying for these women, praying, we had a guy call the other day, and he called looking for an abortion for his girlfriend. We talked a little bit, and he's like, honestly, I don't want her to do it. These guys have no voice. They have no voice in the matter. So praying is a huge thing. Even on Facebook, I don't generally advocate Facebook debates, because I don't think you change people's minds on Facebook. But there's so many cool Facebook things out there now, like memes and stuff like that. There's groups like Online for Life, Students for Life of America, Rock for Life. They put some really cool pictures and quotes up there that really get you thinking. Facts. So that's something too, where you never know who it's going to affect. Facebook, so I do that kind of stuff. And I've had people say, send me a message on Facebook saying, my friend's thinking about having an abortion, what can I say? Like, you can be a resource like that. Also, being just an understanding person, if they know you and they know that you're loving, then they might feel comfortable coming to you and saying, hey, I might be pregnant, or hey, my girlfriend might be pregnant, or hey, my cousin might be pregnant. Because we know it's happening. We know it's happening at all the colleges. We know people are having sex. We know that statistically, if you have sex, there's going to be someone who gets pregnant, right? But we're not seeing them on campus. That's another thing. You guys can work on making our campuses more friendly for people who are pregnant. Because we can say all day, oh, we're pro-life, we support women who are pregnant, but we're not going to have changing tables. God forbid we have a room where they can breastfeed. Do you know what I mean? What are the policies? Oh, you get pregnant, you get kicked out of school? Yeah, that's loving. That's a great idea. That'll definitely keep her from having an abortion. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. And we always need volunteers at my center. I will put you to work. It'll be fine. So we always need help, even just spreading the word. A lot of times, I don't think I have them with me, we have little like business cards with our helpline on it. All of our services are free and confidential. We do pregnancy tests, parenting classes, options consultations, stuff like that. And we need to get those brochures, those cards in the hands of people on college campuses. And so we could definitely use your guys' help with that. And again, it's nice because it's not something where you're like, well, I can't be there every Wednesday night. It kind of fits with your schedules, because at least when I was in college, my schedule was crazy. So if you guys are anything like I was, that works. We can get creative, we can find things. So there's always a way. But again, I know it can feel hard. Even like praying outside the clinic, some people do that. I have a walk run in May. Jeff's done a great job of help coordinate. I always need volunteers for that. So there's different ways like that. Does that answer your question? Clearly, I don't care about this stuff at all. I'll get to you. 1 second, hun.
So, like, if you go out and vote, and then the legislation is passed against, like, for a pro-choice.
Sure.
So then I guess, like, where I struggle is, like, is it, like, because there's only so much you can do to fight legislation, and then, like, if I'm employed someday, if I, like, accept a healthcare plan that will allow me to get an abortion, like, where does that cross the line?
Gotcha. And that's, again, a great question. With a lot of that stuff, because you can also go to a point where it's like boycotts too. And a lot of times there is a list released annually of companies that are like giving tons of money to Planned Parenthood. And there's some where I'm like, yeah, I don't go there because of that. But it's also important to not burden yourself too much either. Like, you can get too extreme. I definitely believe that God loves us. And so it's good for us to be compassionate to ourselves. And I'm a gut person, like, I'm an intuitive person. So I'm like, if I'm not sure, I pray about it and then just trust God to let me know. Especially with the healthcare plans and stuff, that can get hard too. With birth control also, and I'm not implying anything for the record. Birth control too, I've had some Christian friends who have talked to me, and 1 or 2 of them have been really upset because they're like, wait, I talked to my doctor about this, and then I found out this. And by the way, I'm not against condoms or anything like that. But that never came up at a gathering before. Oh, yeah. But they found out that they were using ones that could work as abortifacients. So, like, especially with those situations, try to get informed and then try to make the best choice possible. With the voting and things like that, for me, and I can only speak for myself, for me, there's deal breakers. We all have priorities, and you have to decide what they're going to be. For me, the priority is life, and for me, that's a deal breaker. Like, if they said, oh, it's okay to kill Hispanic people, they're not really human, that would be a deal breaker for me. In this case, they're saying these people that are younger aren't human, so it's okay to kill them. That's a deal breaker for me. Again, I don't care I care what other good stuff they do, but for my vote, that's a deal breaker. And I think it's good that there's so many different ways that we're tackling this issue and supporting women and supporting families, because we need all of it, because legislation changes. You know, sometimes the other guy gets into office and tries to undo it. And so that's why it's good that we have people fighting that battle, because it makes a difference. But we also need the pregnancy centers who are going to sit there with the pregnancy test and say, we will be with you through this whole thing. You know what I mean? It's really good we have 40 Days for Life people praying outside the abortion clinics and passing out factual information. That's awesome. We kind of need all of it. We need pro-life nurses who are going to share their faith. Like, we need all of it. And teachers who will talk about it. And pastors. We need more pastors to talk about it. Thank you. Because you're good on this. We need all of it. And yeah, just trust your gut and pray. And if it helps you can talk to someone like me, I'll try to be helpful. Because no one can be an expert in everything. So we try to be supportive with that stuff as much as possible. And we love it when people ask questions or call and look for direction on this kind of stuff. Yeah.
You know that ignorant quote that
Yeah.
you put on the board? I've had like friends post on Facebook saying that like anyone who's pro-life is ignorant.
Yeah.
And so like how would you go with that? Like, you know what I mean? There's just
Yep.
some things that I read and I'm like,
And it's hard because it's Facebook. And so people, when they're behind a keyboard or a screen, they'll say horrible things. If they were looking at you in person, I feel like they wouldn't be like, oh, you're ignorant. Well,
no,
maybe.
It would be that way.
Okay, so you guys are very frank with each other, which could be
I'm not
cool.
frank, but he's very frank. So
Okay.
I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, she would be like,
Gotcha.
that's so ignorant. How could you even do
Yep.
that? So,
And I would definitely pray about it, but I think you can do more than that too. If she's talking about something specific, I would say, where do you disagree with this? And again, kind of put her on the offense and make her explain where she's coming from.
And I think it was mainly like the defunding plan.
Yep.
And for I read
like
her,
the videos or something
and stuff, and it was like, oh well, maybe they do a lot more,
Yep.
cancer screenings and stuff than they do anything else. So I was like,
Yep.
maybe I don't know.
Gotcha. Yeah, because how are you going to, no one can be an expert on anything. With me, my response to a lot of that stuff, again, is there's deal breakers. And there's so many, there's lots of other organizations that can do these things. I don't remember if they're called health community centers. Is that what they're called? Community health, yeah. It's the same words, I get the order mixed up. But there's tons of them, and they can do a lot of the same services, and they don't kill people. Okay. Pregnancy centers, we do the pregnancy tests. Women's Care Center over on Farwell, they're amazing. They do the ultrasounds. I think they probably help with prenatal stuff too. And so there's all these alternatives. So that's my thing, is there's alternatives. And as far as this funding, if you think they're great, donate money to them. Don't make me pay for it. I shouldn't have to pay for people to die.
Well, apparently she said that all of the tax money going to them doesn't go to abortions. It can't
Yep.
go to abortions. Is that true? Or
So that's a great question. So there's something called the Hyde Amendment. And the idea with the Hyde Amendment is that federal dollars don't go to abortions. Now, let's imagine that, that was exciting. Let's imagine that you guys all have money and you're just super friendly. It's my birthday. It's not really. And so you decide to give me money. And so you guys all give me money. I put it in my pocket. Is it going to matter? And I just take a $5 out to pay for something. I don't know where that money came from. And so it's true that maybe the funds don't go directly to it, but if I get $5 of federal funds, I can use that towards the rent. And then that's $5 I'm not spending on rent. I can spend that on abortion. Okay. So that's how I would explain it. Abby Johnson has videos, I think, about it that are probably a little more eloquent than mine. And again, Students for Life of America, studentsforlife.org, some of those websites are great because they're always current. They're always sharing comments on some of that stuff. There's definitely the crazies with this issue. There's the people who are going to be like, what about the 12-year-old who's raped by his dad or her dad? They get extreme, so it could go either way. And this and this and this and this. And some of those people, it might not even be worth it. Again, I would just pray for them. Yeah. But it can be frustrating. There have been 1 or 2 occasions where I engage, and then all of a sudden I'm like, it's been an hour. Right, and I'm there in bed with my phone, and I'm like, that's so ignorant. I can't believe they said that. Yeah. So I do that. I think it does go a long way if you can be civil and avoid the personal attacks, because I really see that a lot of times. Science is on our side, philosophy is on our side, logic, it's all on our side, and time. Honestly, future generations are going to look back at us like we look at a lot of the slavery and Hitler stuff, and we're just going to be like, what were they thinking? I really believe that. And the cool thing about that is when you find out, for example, that your grandma was involved in battling against that sort of stuff, you get really proud, right? And I really believe if you guys get involved with this, that's what your grandkids are going to do. They're going to be like, Grandma was so cool. Back in the day, she battled this, or she was speaking up, or she cared about these people who other people didn't care about. I really believe that. So, which gives me a lot of peace and hope. Do you still have a question? I'm so sorry.
What inspires you?
Oh, to do what I do? Yeah. So I always had a strong sense of justice and right and wrong and things like that. And I was a little feisty. I started becoming, I know, shocker. I became a vegetarian in kindergarten. So if that tells you anything, none of my family are vegetarians. My brother and my mom are working towards it. Yes. Yeah, it's stunning my growth. So I always had these strong senses of right and wrong, and this idea that we're all valuable. No matter who they are, what religion, no matter what, we're each valuable. It's just this intrinsic thing because we know that from God's word. And so then this idea that this vulnerable population is getting marginalized and hurt and killed, to me that was just that seemed like a more pressing issue than other stuff. And so then in high school, I was at a Christian high school, and I'm like, we're not doing anything. We're not talking about this. Because again, historically, the church has done some really bad things. But Christianity's also done some really good things. and really filled some social needs and things like that. And so I'm like, we're a Christian school and we're not talking about this. Like, people are dying. And keep in mind, my mom runs a pregnancy center. She started it when I was a baby. So I know about this stuff. So I was like, we have to do something. So we had a pro-life week. And then I got to WLC and I'm like, same thing. Like, no one's talking about this. People are dying. A third of our generation gone from abortion. No one's talking about it. This is crazy. So Pastor Strobel was the campus pastor back then. Now he's a dean, I think. And he talked about it in chapel. And afterwards I was like, I'm so glad you talked about this. And then the little dots cut. And then I was like, wait, we don't have a pro-life group. Well, I'm going to fix that. So then like 2 days later, they had me meeting with the head of PR for the college and the deans because they were scared. I think they were afraid I was going to get us on the news. And I didn't. So I did that. And I ended up getting ed and art degrees and my teacher's license. Like, I got legit degrees. But God was like, you're going to do this instead. So my professors are like, there's only a few female principals. Like, we could get on this track because I like leadership and things like that. And they're like, you know, there's some real opportunities here. And God's like, there's this life issue. And if they don't even make it out of the womb, they can't go to kindergarten. And he just worked on me. And he set up these opportunities. So then I was living on the road, starting college for life groups. And then I worked at a pregnancy center, and then I did a youth program as the prevention side. Because like, if these 14-year-olds aren't having sex, they're not going to have a pregnancy scare. It's amazing how that works. I worked on that, and then I did the helpline, and then I ended up where I am now. So as far as inspired, all kinds of places. My parents, as cheesy as it sounds. And it turns out my grandma did stuff. I didn't know this at the time. And my great-grandma ran a house for unwed mothers. And I didn't know any of this. Like, I found out like years later, but maybe it's genetic. A little too. All right. Well, you guys have stayed extra long, so I'll be around.
You're going to be around.
I'll be around.